It was a cold night in Michigan, and the biting wind seeped through the cracks of the rusty trailer where Brittany, a 5-year-old girl, was curled up under a worn blanket. Her big, frightened blue eyes stared at the door that hadn't opened in days. Her parents had left without a word, as they often did, leaving Brittany alone with a pile of empty cans and a few stale cookies. She didn't cry anymore. Crying didn't bring anyone back. Next door, Mrs. Victoria, an elderly woman with silver hair and calloused hands, watched the small trailer window for the 5th night in a row. Victoria had noticed the frequent absences of the girl's parents, and although she lived a simple and lonely life, something about that child being alone unsettled her deeply. Victoria knew well the suffering of a child who was alone and vulnerable. Maybe that was why she couldn't ignore the situation. That night, when the wind howled louder and thunder split the sky, Victoria saw something that made her shiver. Little Brittany appeared in the trailer doorway, without a coat, her tiny, trembling hands clutching herself as if waiting for someone. Grabbing a flashlight and gathering her courage, Victoria decided she could no longer ignore the situation. She crossed the mud-covered yard, and as she approached, she saw something in Brittany's eyes that struck her. A silent plea. "Hi, sweetheart. Are you okay?" Victoria whispered, keeping a cautious distance. Brittany looked at her with those frightened eyes, but didn't answer. Instead, she took a step back, clutching the blanket to her chest like a shield, as a drop of rain began to roll down her face. "Don't be afraid. I just want to help, okay?" Victoria continued, trying to hold back her own tears at the sight of Brittany's vulnerability. The little girl stood still, not understanding what this woman could possibly do for her. But in that moment, Victoria knew she had to do something for Brittany, even if it meant facing her parents or the challenges of being an elderly woman caring for a child. Victoria woke up before sunrise. The image of little Brittany, curled up and silent, had haunted her all night, keeping sleep at bay. Every detail of that scene weighed on her heart. The chill of the night felt even harsher, and the solitude that had always been her companion now felt unbearable. She knew she had to do something, and quickly. Victoria prepared a cup of hot tea to warm her hands and, with slow steps, decided to visit the trailer once again. When she arrived, she found Brittany still alone, now sleeping on the sofa, with the thin blanket and her small arms exposed to the cold. The trailer was freezing, and the damp smell was strong. The child looked so fragile, as if the wind might carry her away. Gently, Victoria touched Brittany's shoulder, who woke up startled, her eyes wide. "Good morning, sweetheart. Don't be afraid, it's just me, Grandma Victoria, your neighbor," she said with a reassuring smile, holding the girl's little hand delicately. Brittany stayed silent, but didn't pull away from the woman's touch. With a swift motion, Victoria wrapped her in an old coat she'd brought from home. Seeing Brittany accept her gesture, Victoria whispered, "I'm going to take you to my house where it's warmer. There, you can have something to eat. Okay?" Brittany hesitated for a moment, but hunger and cold were stronger than the fear of following a stranger. She nodded slightly, and hand in hand, they walked to Victoria's small house, where a kettle was bubbling on the stove and the smell of fresh bread filled the air. Upon entering, Victoria led Brittany to the kitchen and sat her near the stove to warm up. The little girl looked around, taking in every corner of the house, a place so different from anything she'd known. There were flowers everywhere, coloring Victoria's kitchen, and the sunlight was beginning to filter through the lace curtains. "Would you like some bread?" Victoria asked, slicing off a piece. Brittany took the piece with both hands, devouring it quickly. Her hunger was evident, and Victoria wondered just how long the child had been like this. A pang of sadness filled her chest, knowing this wouldn't be the last time she'd need to help her. With a gentle smile, she served more bread and a mug of milk. "Can I ask you something, Brittany?" Victoria said, kneeling beside the chair to be at her level. The girl looked at her, saying nothing. "Do you know where your parents are?" The answer was a shake of her head as Brittany's eyes filled with tears. She knew she should miss them, but deep down, all she felt was fear. Fear of when they'd return and what they'd do if they found out she'd left the trailer. With each unspoken word, Victoria grasped more deeply the extent of Brittany's abandonment. In that moment, She decided she wouldn't let the girl return to the trailer anytime soon. Victoria gave Brittany a warm hug and whispered, "You can stay here with me for as long as you want." Brittany didn't fully understand what stay meant or how long as you want was, but she closed her eyes, and for the first time in a long while, she felt safe. The next morning, Brittany woke to the sound of birds singing at the window. Sunlight filtered softly through the lace curtain, casting patterns on the wooden floor. For a moment, she forgot about the trailer, the cold, the loneliness. She smelled coffee and something sweet coming from the kitchen, and the familiar birdsong mixed with the gentle clinking of a pan. Victoria was there, adding more wood to the stove to prepare breakfast. When she noticed Brittany standing, rubbing her sleepy eyes, she smiled and opened her arms. "Good morning, sweetheart. I hope you slept well." Victoria came closer, helping Brittany adjust her oversized pajama shirt that nearly covered her feet. Not quite sure what to say, Brittany just gave a shy smile as she watched Victoria go about what seemed like a warm, welcoming routine. The table was set with cups, fresh bread, and scrambled eggs. To Brittany, it looked like a feast. Her heart raced, unsure if she could touch the food. Maybe it was a mistake being here. Maybe Victoria would change her mind and send her back to the trailer. "You can sit down, dear. I made eggs for you. I hope you like them," said Victoria, noticing the girl's hesitation. Brittany sat down and, with her small hands, began eating slowly, as if each bite might disappear at any moment. Between bites, Victoria watched the girl, trying to understand how someone so young could carry the weight of such neglect. That quiet morning, full of simple gestures, marked something special between them, a silent promise of care and trust. After breakfast, Victoria took Brittany to the small garden she tended in the backyard. It was where she spent most of her time, among colorful flowers that, when not brightening her home, went into a basket she took to the town lighthouse to sell. "Look at these flowers, Brittany. They're like little friends to me," Victoria said, kneeling beside a row of daisies. "When we care for something with love, it grows beautifully, don't you think?" Brittany smiled. For the first time in a long time, she felt free from the weight she carried. Beside Victoria, surrounded by flowers, it was as if the whole world had become a safe and welcoming place. Without realizing it, she started helping Victoria, watering the plants with a small hose. As they worked, Victoria shared stories about each flower. There were the roses, always the most popular at the lighthouse, the sunflowers, which charmed the children passing by, and the daisies, Victoria's favorites, because they were simple and resilient. Brittany listened to every word, fully absorbed in a world she had never known before. Later, Victoria suggested, "How about coming with me to the lighthouse? I can show you where I sell my flowers. I think you'll enjoy seeing the town." Though a bit nervous about going out, Brittany felt safe with Victoria by her side. She nodded in agreement. Wrapped in a cozy coat Victoria had given her, the two made their way to the spot where Victoria always stood with her basket of flowers, watching cars go by and hurried passersby. While they stood there, Victoria held Brittany's hand firmly. Between customers, she watched the little girl, who took in everything with curious eyes, as if rediscovering the world. "What's it like to sell flowers?" Brittany asked, breaking the silence. Victoria smiled, giving her hand a gentle squeeze. "It's my way of making people's days a little brighter. And now, you're helping me do just that." Brittany smiled, and for the first time, she realized that with Victoria, she might have a fresh start. Hope lit up in her eyes, and that afternoon stayed etched in her heart as the beginning of something good and unexpected. The days passed, and Brittany gradually adapted to the peaceful routine of Victoria's home. Every morning, they had breakfast together, took a short walk to the garden, and in the late afternoon, they went to the lighthouse to sell flowers. Victoria had become a motherly figure for Brittany, and for the first time, the little girl felt at home. The fear that once filled her days began to fade, replaced by a lightness she had never experienced. However, Victoria knew she couldn't keep Brittany hidden forever. The girl's parents could show up at any moment, and although they rarely returned to the trailer, she feared they might cause trouble. Deep down, she knew she needed to make a decision. One autumn afternoon, as leaves fell around them and the wind blew colder, Victoria decided it was time to talk to Brittany. They sat on the porch, wrapped in blankets, while the elderly woman watched the sky grow darker. "Brittany, sweetheart," she began, hesitant, choosing her words carefully. "I've been thinking a lot about you and about how you're here with me. I know it's not easy to talk about this, but we need to discuss your parents." Brittany lowered her head, fiddling with her shoelaces. Hearing her parents' names gave her a knot in her stomach. She never talked about them, partly because she feared that mentioning them might take away the little happiness she felt here. They don't care about me, I think," Brittany murmured, her voice wavering. "They always leave me alone. I don't like being with them." Her voice was a whisper, and Victoria held her hand firmly, giving her all the reassurance she could. "I understand, dear, and I want you to know that you're not alone. I will take care of you in whatever way you need for as long as you need," Victoria said, gently stroking Brittany's hair. The little girl's eyes filled with silent tears, but this time they were tears of relief. She allowed herself to lean on Victoria's shoulder, feeling a warmth she had never felt before. Victoria's heart tightened at the sight of how fragile Brittany was, marked by abandonment. "You know, Brittany, I have a friend who might be able to help us," Victoria continued calmly. "She works with children and can guide us on what to do next. You don't need to be afraid. You trust me, right?" The girl hesitated, but then nodded. If there was anyone she trusted, it was Victoria. The next day, Victoria took Brittany to meet Anna, a social worker in town. Anna was a gentle, caring woman with a soft voice and a warm smile. They talked for a few minutes while Brittany played with some dolls in the corner of the room. Anna watched the girl attentively, careful not to scare her, already aware of the delicate situation she was in. "Victoria, let's discuss what might be best for her," Anna said, casting a tender glance at Brittany. "For now, I think she can stay with you, but we may need more information about her parents. Any changes can be gradual, and nothing will be done without you and Brittany agreeing." Victoria felt a sense of relief, but she knew it would be a long journey filled with challenges. On the way home, she shared the news with Brittany, who was thrilled to hear she could stay with Victoria a while longer. "So, I can stay more?" Brittany asked with a hint of hope in her voice. "Yes, sweetheart, for as long as you need," Victoria replied, squeezing her hand. And in that moment, as they walked back home, they both felt that their bond was stronger than blood. Fate had brought two lonely souls together, and together they would face whatever lay ahead, growing more certain each day that true love and care could heal even the deepest wounds. Days passed, and Brittany adapted more and more to life with Victoria. They laughed together, tended to the flowers, and every night, Victoria read stories before Brittany drifted off to sleep. For the little girl, it felt like a dream filled with protection and care. She began to smile more, and little by little, the traces of fear and insecurity faded from her face. However, on a cold November morning, Victoria received an unwelcome surprise. She was about to take Brittany to the market when she saw an old car pull up in front of the abandoned trailer. Out of the vehicle stepped two figures that Victoria immediately recognized. Brittany's parents. They looked as worn out as the car itself, glancing around in confusion, as if trying to piece together what had happened during their absence. Victoria's heart raced. She gripped Brittany's hand tightly and turned back, leading her quickly into the house. "Stay here, sweetheart, and don't come out until I say so, okay?" Victoria said, trying to keep her voice steady. Brittany nodded, though her eyes revealed the fear that had resurfaced at the mention of her parents. She ran to the bedroom, closing the door quietly, and stayed there, listening to the muffled sounds of voices at the front. Victoria then stepped outside, closing the door behind her. She approached Brittany's parents, who already looked annoyed and impatient. "What do you think you're doing with our daughter, you meddling old woman?" Brittany's mother shouted, staggering and pointing a trembling finger at Victoria. "Did you think you could just steal her away from us?" Victoria stood her ground, lifting her chin. She knew she had done right by Brittany, and she wouldn't let herself be intimidated. "Steal her?" Victoria said firmly. "You left this little girl alone for days, without food, without anyone to look after her. Do you even know what it means to care for a child? Because I see no sign of that in either of you." Brittany's father stepped forward angrily, but Victoria held her ground. "She's our daughter. No one has the right to take her from us," he shouted, struggling to keep his balance. "You're just an old woman. You can't do anything against us." Victoria felt anger rise within her, but she stayed composed. She knew yelling wouldn't solve anything. If Brittany's well-being matters to you, then do the right thing and leave her here with me, where she's safe, Victoria said, trying to appeal to any trace of responsibility they might still have. Brittany's mother let out a mocking laugh, but a flicker of hesitation crossed her eyes. She looked at the abandoned trailer, at the barely functioning old car, and then back at Victoria. Part of her knew Brittany would be better off here, but pride and addiction held her in a cycle of destruction. After a few seconds of tense silence, she muttered, "This isn't over. We'll be back," casting a threatening look at Victoria before turning toward the car and dragging her husband along. Victoria stood still, watching them leave. When the car finally disappeared in the distance, she felt the tension release and let out a deep sigh. She returned to the house, where she found Brittany curled up in the corner of the bedroom, her wide eyes filled with fear. Are they going to take me away?" Brittany whispered, clutching the teddy bear Victoria had given her. Victoria embraced her tenderly and replied, "No, sweetheart, they're gone. I promise you're safe here with me." And as she held Brittany close, her determination to protect this little girl only grew stronger. After the confrontation with Brittany's parents, Victoria knew she had to act quickly. Her instincts told her that the two wouldn't just leave the matter alone. Seeing the fear in the little girl's eyes, she made a decisive choice. She would seek legal help to protect Brittany. The next day, Victoria called Anna, the social worker, and explained what had happened. Anna listened carefully, grasping the seriousness of the situation. "Victoria, I'll be honest. If Brittany's parents decide to go to court, they could claim her. But if we can gather evidence of abandonment and neglect, you might have a chance to protect her," Anna explained, her voice calm but realistic. Determined, Victoria nodded. She knew it would be a long process, but she wouldn't hesitate to do whatever it took to ensure Brittany's safety. "Where do we start?" Victoria asked, unafraid of the work it might require. "We'll need medical reports and proof that she was without supervision or care when you found her. I'll set up an appointment with a child psychologist, someone who can talk to Brittany to understand what she's been through. We need to act quickly in case her parents try anything," Anna explained. That week was filled with trips to appointments and interviews with psychologists. Brittany, initially frightened, began to open up gradually during the sessions. The psychologist, a kind woman named Laura, used toys and drawings to help Brittany express her feelings. Still shy, Brittany drew pictures of herself, often curled up in a corner, and gradually described the nights she had spent alone in the trailer, waiting for her parents to return. "Sometimes they forgot about me. They were gone for a long time, and I only had some cookies to eat," Brittany murmured in one session, as Laura listened with compassion. Brittany's accounts and the specialist's assessments became an important file for the case, a solid foundation for Victoria's fight for custody. It was exhausting, but Victoria felt that each step brought her closer to her goal, keeping Brittany safe. At the end of one of these sessions, while Brittany played with building blocks in the waiting room, Anna pulled Victoria aside for a conversation. "I'm impressed, Victoria. Brittany clearly trusts you, and with psychological and legal support, our chances of a favorable outcome are growing," Anna said, placing a reassuring hand on Victoria's shoulder. Victoria sighed, feeling both relieved and exhausted. She deserves a chance to live in peace and with love. "I'll go to the ends of the earth for her, Anna," Victoria affirmed with determination. That evening, when they arrived home, Victoria made Brittany's favorite dinner, vegetable soup with homemade bread. After dinner, Brittany snuggled up beside Victoria on the couch, and the two sat in silence for a few moments, watching the flames dance in the fireplace. "Grandma Victoria," Brittany said, using that special nickname for the first time, warming the elderly woman's heart. "Yes, sweetheart," Victoria replied, gently stroking the girl's hair. "If my parents come to take me, can I still stay with you?" Victoria felt her eyes fill with tears, but didn't hesitate. "I'll do everything I can to make sure you stay here, Brittany. Everything I can." Brittany smiled and nestled even closer. For her, Victoria's arms were the safest place in the world, and in that moment, she believed that nothing could ever separate them. The tranquility that Brittany and Victoria were slowly building was interrupted when, a few days later, a black car parked in front of Victoria's house. Out stepped Brittany's parents, accompanied by a tall man in a suit carrying a folder of documents. Victoria watched from the window as Brittany, noticing the commotion, instinctively hid behind the sofa. Victoria opened the door, her face serious and determined. She had known this moment might come, but she was prepared. "Miss Victoria, I am here as the legal representative of Brittany's parents," announced the man in the suit, his voice cold. "They want custody of their daughter back and are prepared to take the necessary steps to reclaim her." Victoria's heart raced, but she kept her tone steady. This child was neglected by them, left alone and uncared for, and now they want her back? "Just because someone finally took care of her?" she replied, not backing down. Brittany's mother, visibly irritated, stepped forward. "She's my daughter, not yours," she shouted, her voice raised and trembling. "We have the right to be with her." The lawyer intervened, maintaining his composure. "Ms. Victoria, I understand your intentions may be good, but the law protects the rights of biological parents. Unless there's a court ruling otherwise, Brittany should be with them." Victoria looked at the lawyer, then at Brittany's parents. She sensed they were under pressure, perhaps at the thought of losing custody of their daughter permanently, or maybe for reasons she couldn't yet understand. "All I want is this girl's well-being. Brittany isn't safe with you, and the courts will see that. I will not allow her to return to a life of abandonment and fear," Victoria said, standing firm. Brittany's mother murmured something to the lawyer, who cast a cold glance at Victoria. "Then we'll let the courts decide this. Until then, prepare for court," he declared, handing her a summons for the hearing. The three of them turned away, leaving Victoria holding the document and feeling the weight of what lay ahead. When she went back inside, she found Brittany still curled up, hiding behind the sofa, and she rushed over to comfort her. "Shh, sweetheart, it's okay," Victoria said, lifting the girl into her arms. "I'm here, and nothing bad is going to happen to you." Brittany, still trembling, looked up at Victoria, seeking reassurance. "Are they going to take me, Grandma Victoria?" Victoria took a deep breath, holding back tears to keep from scaring her further. "I promised I'd fight for you, and I will, all the way. Trust me, my dear." That night, after Brittany fell asleep, Victoria spent hours reviewing the case with Anna and the lawyer who had agreed to help them. They decided to gather every piece of evidence of neglect and mistreatment for the trial, which would take place in a few days. Victoria knew it wouldn't be easy, but each challenge only made her stronger and more determined. On the morning of the hearing, Brittany was nervous, clutching Victoria's hand tightly as they walked into the courthouse. When she saw her parents there, fear returned to her eyes. Victoria knelt down to face Brittany and gave her a kiss on the forehead. "Remember, you're safe? I'm right here with you," Victoria said, giving her the calm reassurance she so desperately needed. As she stepped into the courtroom, Victoria felt that each step brought her closer to a decisive battle. It was time to defend Brittany with everything she had. In that moment, she vowed to do everything possible to ensure that justice would be served. The courtroom was silent as the judge entered, and everyone stood. Brittany, still clutching Victoria's hand tightly, watched with fearful eyes as her parents sat down with their lawyer on the other side. Victoria remained calm, radiating the sense of security Brittany needed in this decisive moment. Anna, the social worker, was the first called to testify. She recounted Brittany's history of abandonment and the days the girl had spent alone in the trailer, emphasizing the emotional impact it had caused. She also described the warm and safe environment Victoria had provided from the very first day. Brittany was found alone, uncared for, and visibly neglected, Anna stated, looking directly at the judge. Miss Victoria provided her not only with shelter, but with stability and love. I can say without a doubt that it saved her life. The parents' lawyer attempted to argue that Victoria had no legal rights over Brittany and that the child belonged with her biological family, but Victoria's defense was well prepared. Her lawyer presented medical and psychological reports detailing Brittany's trauma, and the psychologist Laura was called to recount her sessions with the girl. Brittany showed clear signs of anxiety and fear, especially when mentioning her biological parents, Laura explained with a steady voice. She feels safe only with Victoria, who has become a consistent and trustworthy maternal figure for her. Brittany's parents, nervous and lacking solid arguments, cast irritated looks at Victoria and the witnesses. At one point, Brittany's mother tried to intervene, claiming they had been going through hardships and it wasn't fair to judge them. But the judge, maintaining his composure, simply asked them to remain silent and wait for the verdict. Finally, Victoria was called to speak. With a calm but emotional voice, she addressed the judge. Brittany is a wonderful little girl, and all I want is for her to have the chance to be happy and grow up in a safe home. I know I'm not a blood relative, but I believe the love and care I have for her are as strong as any biological bond. She's been through so much, and I can't allow her to return to a situation where she'll feel unsafe and alone. Victoria cast a loving glance at Brittany, who returned it with a shy smile. The judge paused, observing everyone in the room, then looked at Brittany. "Brittany, dear, would you like to say anything?" the judge asked in a gentle tone. Brittany looked to Victoria, who gave her a slight nod of encouragement. With small, trembling steps, the girl approached. Brittany began in a quiet voice, "I just want to stay with Grandma Victoria. She takes care of me. I don't want to be alone again." The judge nodded, visibly moved. After a brief pause, he announced his decision. "Considering the circumstances presented and the child's well-being, I grant Miss Victoria temporary custody of Brittany, with the possibility of permanent custody if the conditions of neglect remain uncontested." Victoria felt a wave of relief wash over her. She hugged Brittany, who clung to her, now smiling with the joy of someone who finally felt safe. As they left the courthouse, Anna wrapped both of them in a warm embrace. "You deserve this chance. You're a family in the most beautiful and genuine way possible," Anna said with a smile. Back at home, as they arranged the flowers and prepared for their new life, Brittany looked over at Victoria, who was busy in the kitchen. "Grandma Victoria, can I call you Mom?" Brittany asked with a shy smile. With tears in her eyes, Victoria opened her arms to the girl and replied, "Of course you can, my dear. You've always been my daughter at heart." And so, Victoria and Brittany continued together, building a life of love, safety, and hope, where trust and care became the pillars of their new family.